kind of just make sure that you were aware. First of all, thank you for coming along for Mum's Day, and I thank you for all that. But I also was asked, I was also asked, for some of you who don't know, my aunt died the week before Auntie Pam, who was my mum's youngest brother's wife, and she died the week before that this mum died, actually. So he's in Australia, Ian's in Australia, and I did just contact him and say, would you like to, when the family together, would you like me just to say a few words on behalf of Auntie Pam? She's not going to have a funeral, she didn't want a funeral, and they weren't really going to be able to pull a celebration together. Obviously he was in Australia and everything like that. So what you see behind me is Pam's 50th wedding anniversary, and you can see a lot of the photographs of the family and everything like that. So I just want to read what Ian said about his mum, and we'll remember Auntie Pam because yeah, she was an amazing lady. She's one of that era. There is only really my mum's sister, Auntie Barbara, and Uncle Noel that are around. So I just want to kind of just read from him really. So, hello from a very hot South Australia. It's forecast to be 35 degrees today. Sue and I have just come back from the mighty Murray, observing the flood waters passing through from all the rains interstate. A couple of months back, really sad to see houses with waters up to the roof gutters. Mum would have witnessed much worse in August 1952. Mum never spoke of it and refused to answer anything Brian and I would ask. Dad was visiting Mum via the long way was a challenge. And just so people don't are aware, in 1952 was one of the biggest floods in the UK that from then and now, where all the houses, and in fact I hadn't realised because their house was right on the river. So clearly she was there when the floods came through, and obviously Uncle Joe couldn't actually get to see her. So Dad was said visiting Mum via the long way was a challenge, as the cat would straddle many gullies in the road. Mum always said she was one of the lucky ones that night. Every time the River Lynn was in spate and we could hear the rocks rumbling down in the river, Mum went very quiet, making sure that the family was okay. Mum said I was like Uncle Jeff, Mum's brother, and would have got on so well with him, as we both liked travelling the world. Uncle Jeff died at the tender age of 24, returning from overseas while working for BOAC contracting polio. Very shortly after that, the sugar cube vaccine became available. Gran and Mum never got over it. Mum, you never objected to me travelling, but settling in Australia was one step too far. She didn't really take to that idea too well. Ringing Mum to inform her of Brian's death was a day I grew up. It was the saddest day of my life. Mum was heartbroken again. She took it like a trooper, but I know it affected her. Sadness kept in the back door again. Oakley in Lynmouth was Mum's special place, running the bed and breakfast for 40 plus years. It was a business in the summer and a home in the winter. Mum ran a tight ship, which, along with Dad and his taxi and post round, enabled Mum to send us to West Buckland School. No mean feat, to be honest, which meant many financial sacrifices, to which I am very grateful. Mum, to her own admission, was no great cook. The evening meals at Oakley were no gourmet's delight, just something to fill stomachs ready for the day tomorrow. The dining room was always full. Turns out it was just what the holidaying guest was after. However, I wish I had told Mum how much I hated raw beans. They were heaped up in a plate with roast chicken. Brian and I would eat our dinners in the summer in the sitting room on a tray whilst Mum was attending to the guests. Perfect time to open the sash window into the car park and fling out the raw beans whilst Brian was keeping guard at the door. Trouble was, the bones of the chicken got flung out too, and Scampy, our beloved corgi, would always come back into the kitchen chewing chicken bones the next day. Mum was horrified that people were eating chicken in the car park and throwing bones in the garden. She never cottoned on, and we never told her. Clive and Sue Roby got in touch with me saying the first time they visited Oakley was in 1978. They said Mum and Dad were so welcoming, but that telephone going off at all hours for the taxi was so difficult. On reflection, made their holiday as they could go back to sleep. Dad forgotten to disarm the external bell. Their daughter Kate was a budding pianist who asked if she could practice on the piano. Only if you keep the door open was the reply, and Mum would listen to her playing whilst upstairs tending to the rooms in the morning. Kate went on to be a professional musician, picking Mum up from Garston House to a recital at St Mary's Linton. Mum enjoyed it so much, Clive, Sue and family would do Christmas carols at Garston House, but this year with one resident being sadly absent. One last thing, Mum never wanted to leave the area. When Mum fell and broke her hip, there was only one option, Garston House. Although for the first year, Mum didn't really enjoy it, but realised that she was in the best place soon after. I work in aged care, and the pressure staff are under to meet all requirements is huge. So a big thank you to Garston House, where Mum could look out from the lounge window and see everything going on. Aged care facilities don't always get it right, but Mum was happy in the end, and that is all that matters. Wherever we are in the world, Mum, the goodbye will always be the same. Goodbye, Mum. Lots of love. Enjoy the natter with Grandad, Uncle Jeff, Dad and Brian, corgis and Holly Dog. Till we meet again, Ian and Sue. Thank you. Thank you. Let's just remember Auntie Pam. And if you just want to watch some of the photographs there and everything like that, you can see some of the family.